Oregon, are you doing okay? Oregon, are you doing all right? Well, we're going to answer that question here. Now, when you look at last season and the great offensive output that the Oregon Ducks had last season, a big reason, now there was many reasons why that offense was great, but a big reason why is their offensive line. This offensive line that was able to protect Bo Nix and was one of the best offensive lines in all of college football last season. This season, they've allowed 7 sacks through 2 games. Now, we saw the offensive line with their issues against Idaho. And I think the talking point coming into this game against Boise State this last Saturday was, it's a fluke, whatever, let's just get it corrected and let's take care of business, statement win against the Broncos. It didn't happen. Boise State was able to get Dylan Gabriel moving back there. They were able to get pressure. And, the first thing that I think of, I know that we have the injury to Matthew Bedford, and I know that there has been some moving chess pieces on this Oregon offensive line. And I get that. And then I understand how much of an impact that will make. But the strengths of the Oregon offensive line coming into this season were the tackles. Josh Connerly and Johnny Cornelius, they were very confident in their ability at the tackle position. Now, I know pass protection it's a 5-man unit, right? It's a 6-man unit. It's a 7-man unit, right? It's not just 2 guys. But, of course, the building blocks of your pass protection are going to be your 2 tackle spots. And you felt that those 2 tackles were really, really good for Oregon. And I think the surprising part of what's happened with Oregon's offensive line is that pass rush coming off the edge and sometimes beating some of these really good offensive tackles. So I know there's been some shuffling, and I know that has an impact on this, but I think the most surprising part out of all of this has been what's been going on at the offensive tackle spot as well. Now, that is the concern. Of course, what's happening on the offensive line. There are some concerns maybe on the defensive side of the ball, but I really want to stay right now on the offensive side of the ball when I talk about the Oregon Ducks. Yes, there may be a concern up front on the offensive line. Yes, they need to find a way to either correct that and correct it soon, or they need to find a way to work around it. The good thing is, and we saw this in this game against Boise State, okay, because that's what a lot of it, and it wasn't just the offensive line, but the entire team. Okay, we saw what we saw against Idaho. Let's take a step up and let's prove some things and let's improve in week number 2 against the Broncos of Boise State. I think in this game against Boise State, we saw what Oregon can be. We saw that Oregon can be completely and a very explosive football team. Evan Stewart over the top. We saw what Tez Johnson can do, not only on offense, but on special teams in the return game as well. We saw that explosiveness that exists within the Oregon Ducks. Now, we have this offensive line issue. And, of course, it is a big issue for longer developing pass plays in pass protection. But if there's one offense that's maybe built to maybe work with maybe some of these issues, it's Oregon. Because what is Will Stein's offense? What do they really want to be able to do? They want to be able to get rid of the football quickly. They want to be able to get the ball to their athletes in space. And boy, I mean, we saw it against Boise State. They got athletes. They got some of the best athletes in the country. Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, Trayshawn Holden, right? Gary Bryant still coming back from an injury. But once they get all of those guys at full strength, obviously a good amount of them are at full strength already. And then I haven't mentioned at the tight end position. I haven't mentioned at Kenyon Sadiq, right? We saw, even once again, we come back to the offensive line, even though there's some issues there, even in the run game as well. We saw the explosiveness, and we saw what we know Jordan James can be as well. Look, Oregon is not all of a sudden, because of these issues. Okay, if you think Oregon is all of a sudden going to be out of the playoff picture or out of the Big Ten championship picture or even out of the national championship picture, you need to slow your roll. You need to open your eyes a little bit because, I know they do have some issues to fix. I don't want to say that they don't have issues to fix. They certainly do. This is maybe not the team we expected them to be. And I think Oregon's issues that they need to solve maybe can open the door for other Big Ten contenders to maybe step up when we all thought, myself included, that it was going to be Ohio State and that it was going to be Oregon, lock them up for Indianapolis at the end of the year, and that's just the way it's going to be. But don't think now that Oregon all of a sudden just won't be in that picture. They're going to be in that picture. They just have little things to figure out. And I think in today's day and age of college football, where you have more moving pieces, I think, than you did before, more new guys coming into your program, you have this kinds of things. So if they can't really get those offensive line issues figured out, Will Stein and this offensive coaching staff needs to figure out a way to neutralize and how to get the ball quicker to some of their athletes over there in space as well for the Oregon Ducks. This is still a really, really good team, folks. Do not sell your stock on the Oregon Ducks. They are going to be in a championship picture at the end of the season. All right, let's talk about the Michigan Wolverines. Because 31-12, it was not pretty in more ways than one for Michigan. Now, I've gotten my negative out of the way as it pertains to Michigan. Go watch it if you're a glutton for punishment, right, so to speak. Go watch my reaction from Saturday. But now it's time to look ahead. It's time to focus on the future because Michigan has a game against Arkansas State, and then they play the USC Trojans. All of a sudden, that USC game is looking pretty daunting for the Michigan Wolverines. They got to use this week building up to Arkansas State to be able to fix some things. What do they need to fix? First things first, they need to use that performance against Texas as a wake-up call. You need to be able to look in the mirror and say, we got to figure things out. Because if we don't figure things out, and if we don't build that momentum and the confidence against Arkansas State, we have a USC team that can come in here and they can beat us. And all of a sudden, we're staring 500 in the face early in the season. All of a sudden, we're staring at 2-2. And we don't want that. Nobody wants that, right, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They want to be able to continue on their track record that they've laid over the last couple of years. But this is a completely different team. I think we all know that by now. If you didn't know it before, Texas, you certainly know it now. This is a very different team. And maybe the approach needs to change just a little bit. Now, fixes. What do we need to fix? I think the first thing is the identity of Michigan football. Has been the offensive line and has been the run game. And those have taken clear steps back. I think the thing that they have to do against Arkansas State, get that confidence up, figure things out on the offensive line, figure things out in the run game. Donovan Edwards has not been very good these first 2 weeks. Okay, Donovan Edwards was a guy that we were looking at can be a 1,000-yard rusher. Donovan Edwards could maybe lead the Big Ten in rushing. I know that there were some rumblings coming out of camp that Khalil Mullings was going to work his way into an RB1 role, and it could really be migrating towards that. And maybe this week is figuring that out, figuring exactly who and what you want to invest in as it comes to the run game. Now, when you're looking 2 weeks ahead of time, you're looking at that game against the USC Trojans, all right? All of a sudden, USC, they can play against your offensive line. They can buck up, and they can push you. I'm not going to say they can push you around, but they can at least create a stalemate like they did against the LSU offensive line, okay? And if USC's front plays like they did against LSU, they play like that against Michigan, USC is going to have a pretty good time. So you need to be able to fix what you have on the offensive line and the run game because that's been the identity. You need to get back to doing what Michigan does best because it was proven, I think even proven during the Fresno State game, but certainly proven during the Texas game that if you can't run the ball and if you can't smash, as Sherrone Moore likes to say, if you can't do that, J.J. McCarthy's not there to save you this year. Okay, he's not there to save you on a 3rd and 8. He's not there to save you on a 3rd and 9. This past game with Davis Warren, I think it's very apparent that it will be better if this run game is the primary focus and this offensive line improves and they're able to road grade and they're able to establish once again that Michigan identity of toughness and physicality up front. Because all of a sudden, okay, whether it's Arkansas State or whether it's USC or whoever it is the rest of the season, I talked about that blueprint to beating Michigan that both Fresno State and Michigan games have shown, is that if you can come up to the line of scrimmage and contain and stop this run game, Michigan cannot beat you over the top. So you need to be able to get that confidence back in your identity of who you are as a football program, because if you don't, all the pressure then goes onto the shoulders of Davis Warren to create plays down the field. I'm not sure how confident I am at this point in time. It still kind of baffles me a little bit that now I don't know if they looked into the transfer portal. I don't know if their NIL was not in the correct situation to bring in a transfer quarterback. But considering now what we've seen through 2 games, I thought, like, you looking back at my stuff months ago, I said Michigan is going to be the buyer of all buyers at the quarterback position in the transfer portal market. And they weren't. Maybe they believed in what they have. Maybe we just haven't seen it yet. Maybe there's still some developing to do. Maybe there's some talent within Davis Warren, and maybe the combination with Alex Orji and the balance that he can have in some Wildcat type of stuff as well. Maybe there's something there. And maybe it needs to be developed, and maybe Sherrone Moore and this offensive coaching staff needs to be able to bring that out of some of these quarterbacks as well. So that's what they need to be able to fix on offense. If they can't fix it, there's going to be games later on in the schedule that aren't Oregon, that aren't Ohio State, right? That aren't USC, that aren't some of these games that could still be challenges for Michigan football. They need to dial up the pressure. Okay, now this Texas offensive line is a really, really good offensive line. And we talked about the Michigan defensive line and how interesting of a matchup that would be. Texas obviously certainly won that matchup. But all we're hearing about this offseason is Wink Martindale and the pressure and the pressure and the pressure and the pressure. I want to see it. I want to see it against Arkansas State. I want to see them eat. That's what I said about the Nebraska offensive line. I thought they were going to eat against Colorado. I want to see Michigan's defensive line eat against Arkansas State. Because when you look at that matchup against USC in a couple of weeks, if they can't eat, if their defensive line can't get pressure against the Trojans, based on what we've seen against Fresno State and Texas, it could be a long day for the Michigan Wolverines against the Trojans. So get that run game going, dial up the pressure, get those 2 things right, and you got to feel like you'll be in a much better situation going forward and have a much better chance when USC comes to town in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.